The practice of friendship, which you mentioned something about.
And that's a response to isolation.
To isolation.
The inherent nature of our roles as pastor is isolating. Not the only career like that. I'm sure politicians and others, but we're on a pastor's podcast here. It's like there's something very isolating about our work.
Yeah, you know, I mean, again, right now I'm working with so many pastors and getting the chance to interact with more and more. And the phenomenon of the lonely pastor is just really interesting to me.
Do you remember, by the way, one of the first times I met you, we were in a room and you showed up your hand and asked a question of Pete Cesaro. Essentially, like, is it true? I don't get the words correct, but I just remember the question you asked was like, is the sentence that we're going to be lonely as pastors true? Like, is there any way around it?
Yeah, leadership is lonely.
Like, I think where the conversation went is it's both true. There's something inherently lonely about it. However, there are practices and a pathway that doesn't have to be lonely in that full sense.
It does not have to be in that same way. Yeah, there's an existential loneliness to it that I think it's just we carry. Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, right? Because most pastors are extroverts. Not all, I'm not, but most are. And most pastors spend most of their day with people.
Yeah.
And yet most pastors are lonely. And I think a lot of it is because we are constantly in dual relationships. So we have these genuine like friendships. We like this person and we enjoy being with this person, but we're also their pastor, or we're their boss, or we're their co-elder, or we're their employee, or we're under their board's authority, or they, you know, and so we're in all of these dual relationships. And, you know, for example, I loved the team that I worked with at Bridgetown. I mean, to this day, they will go to my grave with deep affinity for a couple of my main coworkers there. But at the end of the day, when I could fire them, I mean, not me, like we weren't set up to where I could just have a bad day and fire them, but, you know, where I would be the one that if something were to happen, I would be the one vested in the authority from a board who would sit down and let them go. That changes a relationship. That dynamic never goes, even with mature people, even with godly people who love each other genuinely, there's a dynamic there.
Yeah.
And if it's not like openly acknowledged, it can be really unhealthy, you know? And then even the really extroverted pastors, you're in these dual relationships all day, and a lot of them are relationships of obligation, you know, and that can sound really condescending, and hopefully only pastors are listening to this. But there's a lot of people that have a moralized relational expectation upon your time, that you have a vocational responsibility to meet at some level. We all do too much of it through people pleasing and such. And that can cause you to relationally max out and just be exhausted. Even because everybody has a limit to their extroversion. Even the most extroverted people I know tap out. And then what happens is often these extroverted pastors tap out by the end of the day and they don't have any more capacity. So they don't actually have time and emotional energy to invest in these really deep relationships. I know there are pastors that don't want to be known and like the power and like the dual relationship and like this perverted way that it makes them feel. And that's a separate thing, or, you know, it's tied. But then there's a lot that I just think kind of grow isolated from people and aren't in these spaces where they're not somebody's pastor and they don't have to, you know, image management every single word, and people's faith isn't riding on their honest answer to questions. Yeah. And where they're deeply known and loved. And I think that being in real friendships, and I mean like long-term, brutally honest, loving, you know, brother and sister friendships, where you are known and you deeply know, where you are deeply listened to and you listen. I just think I don't have a strong enough word in the English language to say how important it is.